everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We've got something seriously extraordinary lined up for you. Instead of just looking at the human body as, basic biology, I want you to picture it as a massive, bustling company. And every massive corporation, well, it needs a top-tier management team to handle all the control and coordination. For us, that ultimate management team is the nervous system. It literally oversees every single department, every action, and every reaction in your body. We're going to unpack exactly how this incredible corporate hierarchy operates, starting from the absolute lowest level ground workers all the way up to the ultimate CEO. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's quickly check out the agenda for today. First, we'll look at the ground worker, the neuron, then bridging the gap with the synapse, followed by the nervous system network. After that, we'll meet the mastermind, the human brain, take a look at the spinal cord and reflexes, and finally, wrap it all up with a quick revision and some key facts.
All right, Section 1, the ground worker, the neuron.
Let's meet the absolute foundation of our entire bodily corporation. To run a massive company, you really need reliable messengers. And in the nervous system, that fundamental structural and functional unit is the nerve cell, or the neuron. Think of the neuron as your ground-level worker whose entire job is just sprinting to deliver messages at top speed. And because these messages sometimes have to travel all the way from, say, your big toe all the way up to your spine, the neuron is actually the longest cell in the entire human body. It's perfectly logical engineering when you think about it. And just like any worker, it has a brain of its own, a central control room called the cyton, or cell body, which holds the nucleus and essentially keeps the whole operation alive.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the neuron actually handles its daily mail. So, attached to that cyton headquarters are two crucial structures. First up, you have the dendrites. You can think of these branch-like antennas as the neuron's inbox. They receive all the incoming messages from the outside. Then, once the cyton processes that data, it sends it right down the axon. The axon acts as the outbox. It's this long, single, wire-like structure that shoots the processed message far away to the very next neuron in line.
Moving on to Section 2, bridging the gap, synapse.
Okay, so we know the message travels down the wire, right? But what happens when that wire simply runs out? Here is a totally mind-blowing concept for you. Our nervous system is actually not one continuous physical wire. Nope! Two neurons never actually touch each other. There's this microscopic empty space between them called a synapse. So this begs a pretty massive question. How on earth does an electrical signal cross an empty gap without a physical wire? I mean, is the body using some kind of microscopic Wi-Fi?
Well, it's not Wi-Fi, but honestly, it's something even cooler. When the electrical signal hits the very end of that axon outbox, it triggers the release of a specific chemical called a neurotransmitter, a super common one being acetylcholine. I want you to picture acetylcholine as a tiny little chemical ferry boat. It physically floats across that empty synapse gap, docks right onto the dendrite inbox of the next neuron, and boom, it restarts the electrical signal on the other side. So the communication just keeps flowing smoothly without a single physical wire connection. Pretty amazing, right?
That brings us to Section 3, the nervous system network.
Let's zoom out a bit and look at how millions of these tiny firing neurons are actually organized into massive corporate departments. So the crucial point here is that our nervous system is divided into two main branches. First, you've got the central nervous system, or CNS. This sits right in the anatomical center of your body, and it's made up of the brain and the spinal cord. You can think of the CNS as the central CPU of a computer. It's fixed in place, and it's the one making all the major executive decisions. But as we know, a CPU is basically useless without a keyboard and a monitor. And that is exactly where the peripheral nervous system, or PNS, comes in. The PNS acts as this vast network of cables, which are your nerves, that physically connects that fixed CPU out to the very edges of your body, carrying data back and forth all day long. Let's look a little closer at those cables. The nerves in the peripheral system are neatly categorized based on exactly where they plug in. You have 12 pairs of cranial nerves that plug directly into the brain, and 31 pairs of spinal nerves that extend out from the spinal cord. Now, you'll probably notice they're counted in pairs. Why is that? Well, because human beings have bilateral symmetry, meaning we have a left side and a right side. So every time a nerve cable extends from the center, it absolutely needs a twin, one to go left and one to go right. This ensures we have perfectly equal wiring across our entire body.
Now, within all this, there's a highly specialized subdepartment called the autonomic nervous system. And just like the name suggests, it manages everything automatic, all your involuntary actions. It essentially has two opposing gears. First, the sympathetic system, which is basically your body's accelerator pedal. When you get scared or stressed, it stops on the gas, spiking your heart rate and preparing you for an emergency. But you can't run on red line forever. That's where the parasympathetic system comes in. It acts as the brakes, decreasing those actions to calm you down and promote relaxation. Accelerator and brakes. It's simple, it's efficient, and it is completely automatic.
All right, Section 4, Mastermind, the human brain.
We've finally reached the top floor of the building. It is time to meet the mastermind, the human brain. But before we look inside, let's cover a few basics. An average adult brain weighs somewhere between 1,300 to 1,400 grams. And actually, let's clear up a huge myth right now. Having a heavier brain does not mean you're smarter. No way. Intelligence relies entirely on how strong the connections between your neurons are, not the physical weight of the organ itself. Now, because the brain is so vital and incredibly soft, the body locks it inside a bony vault called the cranium. But obviously, hard bone against soft brain during a fall, that would be disastrous. So to fix that, the brain is additionally wrapped in something called the meninges. This is a tough membrane that acts as a built-in shock absorber to cushion any impacts.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the forebrain delegates its massive workload. 2/3 of your entire brain is just the cerebrum. If you're studying for a test, trying to solve a math problem, or voluntarily choosing to move your arm, your cerebrum is putting in overtime. It's your center for logic and memory. Next up is the thalamus, which is your body's ultimate relay station and sensor for pain, heat, and cold. And then we have the hypothalamus. We all love to write poetry about how the heart handles love and hate, right? But the truth is, the heart is really just a pump. The real mastermind behind all your drama, your emotions, your hunger, your thirst, and even your body temperature is the hypothalamus. It even bosses around the pituitary gland.
Moving backwards from there, we hit the midbrain and the hindbrain. The midbrain is basically the processor for your bodily cameras and microphones. It translates the raw data coming in from your eyes and ears. Behind that is the hindbrain, featuring the cerebellum. See, while the cerebrum decides you want to walk, the cerebellum is what actually coordinates the muscles so you don't fall flat on your face. It controls your physical balance. But I really want to draw your attention to the medulla oblongata. This controls your vital involuntary actions, things like heartbeat, blood pressure, breathing, and even vomiting. Damage to the medulla is instantly fatal because it runs our most crucial keeping us alive background software. Finally, right next to it is the pons, which acts as the medulla's assistant to fine-tune your breathing rate when you're doing things like talking or exercising.
Section 5, Spinal cord and reflexes.
Now, let's take a look at the brain's most essential executive assistant, the spinal cord. I want you to picture this scenario. You're in the kitchen and you accidentally place your hand directly onto a burning hot stove. The pain signal is immediately screaming from your hand. But if the brain is the top CEO making all the decisions, do you really have time for that signal to travel all the way up your arm, up your neck, into the CPU, wait for processing, and then wait for a command to travel all the way back down?
Absolutely not. You would suffer some severe burns if you waited for the CEO to respond. This is exactly where the spinal cord steps up as the emergency boss. It utilizes a brilliant shortcut mechanism called a reflex action, which, fun fact, was a concept discovered by the scientist Marshall Hall. The second that pain signal hits the spinal cord, the cord doesn't even bother asking the brain. It instantly fires a command straight back to your arm muscles to jerk your hand away. It literally saves you from immediate harm by bypassing the usual chain of command entirely.
And finally, Section 6, Quick Revision and Key Facts. You made it through the anatomy. Now it's time to consolidate what we've learned with a rapid-fire revision of high-yield facts. These are the ones you're going to see a lot in exams, so let's lock these concepts in. Ready? What is the fundamental structural unit and the longest cell in the body? The neuron. What do we call that microscopic empty space bridging two neurons? A synapse. Where does all your thinking, logic, and studying take place? The cerebrum. Which part is the real mastermind behind your body temperature, your hunger, and your emotions? The hypothalamus. What smooths out your movements and controls your balance? The cerebellum. And finally, what center controls your heart rate and respiration? The software keeping you alive? The medulla oblongata. Keep those in mind because those are your absolute must-know takeaways from mastering this topic. Let's also grab two quick medical definitions that stem directly from this anatomy we just covered. Remember those shock-absorbing membranes wrapping the brain called the meninges? Well, if those get infected and swell up, it causes a highly dangerous condition called meningitis. Secondly, if a doctor ever needs to monitor the electrical activity firing across your brain, they'll order an EEG test. That stands for electroencephalogram, and it's specifically designed to record that brain data.
Before we wrap up, I want you to apply everything you've just learned to a real-world scenario. You've likely seen someone who has consumed a bit too much alcohol. They stumble, they slur their words, and they completely lose their physical balance. Based on our anatomical map today, what exactly is happening inside their head to cause this?
The answer actually lies in the hindbrain. Excessive alcohol chemically slows down the function of the cerebellum. Your cerebrum might be telling you to walk in a perfectly straight line, but the cerebellum, the manager of balance and smooth movement, is lagging behind. It totally disrupts the body's beautifully engineered electrical dance of coordination. When you think about it, every single thing you do, from blinking an eye to solving a math equation to just walking upright, is simply a marvel of millions of neurons firing in perfect structured harmony. It really makes you wonder, what else is our biological corporation secretly managing right beneath our awareness? Keep that curiosity alive. Thanks for joining this explainer, and we'll see you next time.